Thank you, Deb. Well, how low will they go? That is the question when it comes to interest rates, because this week the Reserve Bank slashed rates to a record low of 1.5%, and there are signs that it might not be the last cut for the year. The banks haven't passed on the full cut to borrowers, but you can still benefit from the decision. To tell us how, we're joined by Domain Chief Economist Dr. Andrew Wilson. Good morning.
Hi Jane, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. And you?
I'm good.
Now, auctions are taking place around the country today. What can we expect to see after the rate cut?
Well, look, it's been a very strong July for auction activity in most capital cities. Melbourne and Sydney clearance rates around 75%, so that's a seller's market. Lower rates always tend to activate buyers and make sellers more confident. So I think we'll continue to see that strongish auction market in most capital cities, driven by lower interest rates.
Some economists are predicting we could even have another cut on Melbourne Cup Day. How likely do you think that is?
I don't think it'd be a surprise. Certainly the bias is still downwards. We have it announced that the Bank of England have cut their official rates down to 0.25%. First cut in 7 years. So the global economy rates are much lower than Australian rates. Our dollar's still too high, and really our economy seems to be going nowhere as well. We look like we may have passed the peak of the building boom. So look, I think the bias is certainly downwards. So we may end up with official rates below 1%. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year.
All right, we talk about the RBA cutting rates and relief for mortgage holders, but the truth is that the banks haven't passed on the full cut.
Yeah, very naughty.
Tell me how long they've been doing that, and also whether there are still ways for mortgage holders to benefit.
Well, look, since we started the easing cycle of interest rates, and that was November 2011, we've actually seen the banks hang on to around about 0.75% of the official cuts.
That's quite a bit.
So that's quite a bit, and that's around about $50 off a $500,000 mortgage at the moment. And of course, it actually also equates to 3 interest rate cuts. So has really the Reserve Bank wasted 3 interest rate cuts in the easing cycle? But I think the fact that we do have the downward bias in interest rates means that, I think potential mortgage buyers should not look at fixing rates. I think that's something we should move to one side. Look to get the best variable rate. Go to banks, squeeze them, get them to get you the best deal you can, but forget about those fixed rates for the meantime. And banks are ready to deal, I think, at the moment. And we don't have those same strong relationships we've had with banks before, so it's just really an open market environment.
Now, you mentioned the last rate cut was passed on in full.
Yes.
That was sort of around the federal election.
Wow.
Labor was talking about a royal commission.
What a coincidence.
And now we've got the Prime Minister coming out saying, well, banks will face a parliamentary inquiry. Is that going to scare?
Well, I don't want to join the dots, but certainly the full rates were passed on in May, and now they haven't been passed on. So what action can be taken to make sure the banks do pass on that rate, I'm not quite sure, but that's certainly a conundrum for politicians, and we wait to see what the outcome is. We have a different mix in the Senate now, so maybe there'll be some energy there to try to get those full rates passed on and to ensure we get the full stimulus in the economy.
Do you think that tougher talk by the Prime Minister and the Treasurer will affect the way banks work at all?
I don't know, but Mr Shorten's still talking about a royal commission. So, as I said, that different mix in the Senate, that might be some energy there to give some motivation to banks to pass on the full cuts.
So will that have any impact on potential home buyers and those who already have a mortgage?
Well, look, it's good news if you've got a mortgage. It's probably not so good news, lower interest rates for first home buyers, because lower interest rates typically mean higher prices, and that's really bad news for first home buyers, particularly in the Sydney market, of course, and to a lesser degree Melbourne, because the struggle is to get the deposit. In Sydney it's about $120,000, in Melbourne about $100,000. So look, lower interest rates, they're so low now that the repayment equals the rent. It's saving the deposit, so lower rates aren't really good news for first home buyers.
All right, so longer term though, we're talking about these cuts at the moment make it a seller's market. Longer term, what are we likely to see for the housing
market? We're not going to see that roller coaster ride we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, with those double figure price growth over the year. I think we're going to see a much more moderate, flatter cycle, even with lower interest rates, maybe 3 or 4% through the cycles. And there won't be much difference between capital city markets as well. And this is why we're cutting rates, because we're just losing so much fizz out of the economy.
All right, it is something that we could talk about endlessly,
well,
Dr. Andrew. I know you could. Dr. Andrew Wilson from Domain, thanks for joining us today. Pete?
Thank you, Jay.